asked you when I first came in. You got Madison Packer here, brucedriver, both Badgers. What's with the Michigan?
Daughter trumps that.
Yeah, well, that's what he said. Daughter trumps that. So, first of all, I'd like to congratulate Madison on her tremendous career, and hopefully things continue on and she can play as long as. I think Madison, it's like you're going to play till they take your skates away, right? That's the whole goal. And that's kind of how we always feel as hockey players. So, for me, I grew up in Toronto, Canada, which it's hard for me when I start thinking about sports here to kind of compare any sport in the U.S. to the sport of hockey in Canada, because they kind of say we were born with skates on, but it was one sport that pretty much every kid either played or cheered for their favorite team on TV, and I was no different. So, obviously, huge Devils fan, worked for the organization now for the last 23 years, played for 12. My heart is certainly here in New Jersey, but I grew up a Leaf fan. Obviously, because growing up in Toronto, that's kind of what you did. Very fortunate when I was a young boy to play travel hockey with an organization that we actually practiced at Maple Leaf Gardens, usually 6, 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday mornings when they had hockey night in Canada. Leafs would be playing that night. So a lot of times we'd skate in the morning, we'd go across the street, have breakfast, come back and watch the pregame skates of the Leafs and whoever they were playing. And occasionally also stick around the afternoons to watch the major junior team, the Toronto Marlies play. So it was a great environment for me as a kid to grow up in. My brother's 2.5 years older than me, and he was playing hockey obviously before I did. I still have visions of playing ball hockey in the driveway and him sticking me in goal and him firing tennis balls off my head. And, it's kind of how I got my start. My dad coached. I just played recreationally, but again, as a kid growing up in Canada, I was just kind of following in my brother's footsteps. And certainly totally different. Madison talked about getting cut, or it was Bannerman, I think you said. Exact same thing happened to me. Playing in that same organization where we were practicing at Maple Leaf Gardens. We had won 4 city championships in a row. And back in that era, the majority of the players in the NHL grew up in the Toronto area within probably about 100 miles of Toronto. So if you think about it in those realms, growing up in probably the greatest place that you could live to fulfill a dream of playing in the NHL. And I got cut from the team after playing basically with the same group of players. They said I was too small. Said I didn't think they'd be able to compete. Now, we grew up checking from the time we were 4 years old, so body checking was always a part of the game, so that physical part of the game was always there. It was disappointing, but it was really a turning point for me. And this is, I think, where I started to learn about mental toughness, and realizing that, it was going to be difficult. We didn't have tier 1 hockey, everything was AA, and I think we might have had a B level. So there's no AA teams for me to make at that point, so I had to play A hockey for a little bit. Battled my way back up, and I took the edge. I didn't want to quit hockey, but I had something to prove to myself, I think, and to the coaches who didn't take me, that I was going to work as hard as I could possibly be back to playing. I'm very fortunate. I can literally stand here today and tell you I'm one of the lucky ones, just to have a career, period. Things along the way kind of just fell right for me. I played tier 2 junior A hockey. I was drafted by the Oshawa Generals, which is major junior A, obviously, you guys know the Oshawa Generals. Went to training camp that year, and I just didn't like the situation. They had some good young players there. A few players went on to play in the NHL. I just took a step back and decided to go back, play for my tier 2 junior team. I think that's when you're kind of oblivious to everything that's going on around you with regard to scouting and stuff like that. I was still a little bit young to even think about that. I wanted to be an NHL player, but all of a sudden my parents started getting phone calls from colleges and universities because they figured I wanted to go to school. I was recruited mostly by Eastern schools. The only school from the West that recruited was Wisconsin. I knew nothing about Wisconsin. I didn't know anything about their hockey program. All I know was they the recruiters, well, Bob Johnson was our coach, a legend obviously of the game. Their head recruiter's name was Stanley. He was 15 years in Bowling Green, 15 years Wisconsin, 15 years in Maine. He still, I think, helps Maine in his 80s, in his probably mid-80s now, he still helps them. He was a legend. He found players where others wouldn't go. And I still remember we played our championship game. I don't remember what the series was, 5-game, 7-game series. I played defense, and we lost the final game 11-3. And I had Bob Johnson and Grant Stanbrook in my parents' living room the next day offering me a full scholarship in Wisconsin. So for me, the choice was easy. I didn't grow up rich, poor, never really thought about that stuff. My father worked for Goodyear Tire in the factory. Quit school in 8th grade to work. So for me, it was an opportunity to get a scholarship and not have my parents pay for it. So probably the smartest decision that I made, even though I really didn't know what the heck I was doing. The Badgers the year before finished in last place in their division, still ranked nationally, still a really good team. But my first year there, we won the national championship. That was absolutely the turning point right there. When you start winning things like that, that's when you get noticed. So I was drafted that year. We talked about the Colorado Rockies. I was drafted in 1981. I was rated, I think, to go in the 3rd round. You know, the draft back then, there was no, big hoopla. You just got a phone call. So there's no site to be at. I was just at home. I didn't know that it wasn't on TV. Didn't follow the draft. There was nothing like that. So I ended up getting a phone call in the middle of the afternoon. I was drafted in the 6th round, which was great. I didn't really care. I got drafted by an NHL team. So I still today, I was telling Barry, I still don't have a Colorado Rockies jersey. Never got one then. The local newspaper brought one over to my house, I think the next day, and took photos for press release and stuff. And that was kind of about it. So I went back to Wisconsin, played second year there. That was probably the best team we had. In the 3 years I was there, we lost the national championship game in North Dakota, went back the 3rd year, won another national championship. So you see the trend, right? You're very fortunate to choose a school, have great success. Fast forward the next year, I was asked to try out for the Canadian Olympic team, which I'd never been involved in any of the national programs. It's unlike everything in the U.S. here now. These players, the boys now are groomed to make national teams. The USA Hockey's done a tremendous job in the structure that they have for players to stay together for longer periods of time. So there's 2 tryouts that year. One was in Montreal with 50 players. I went to that tryout in June. Made it through that cut. There was 50 players in Calgary, I think a few weeks later. They broke it down to 50 players, brought us together again in September, actually in August in Calgary. Made it through that cut, but they basically said right then and there, you may not play on this team, you may not be in the ranks. So it was a little bit of a decision there. Do I decide to, take a step back and go back to college, or am I all in? Obviously I weighed the fact, look, if I don't make it all the way through, I can just go back to school the second half of the year, but I would again miss half a year of college. My decision to stay was, it was a little bit rocky. I never forget, went to Sweden in September, came back off of that trip. We had 9 defensemen at the time. Kevin, Deneen, and myself were 2 defensemen on that team, and the coach Dave King, who ultimately ended up coaching in the NHL as well, came in and told us, he goes, I'm going to cut one of you tomorrow. So it's like, you don't even think about, your head's kind of spinning. I don't even recall the game. Went out and played the next day. He decided to keep us both. And then fast forward to the Olympics. We had some great teammates. Doug Lister was on our team. James Patrick was on our team. 2 great defensemen of long careers. And in the end, I worked myself up to be one of the top 4 defensemen on the team. So I got something that I didn't know was going to happen. Kevin Deneen became one of our shutdown players. He was a great player for us in the Olympics there too. And I really credit a couple of other things and reasons why I ended up playing in the NHL. I fully expected after the Olympics to just, get back in shape in the summertime, take some time off, go back to Wisconsin for my last year and graduate. And I got a call from the Devils within about a week or so coming off the Olympics, asked me if I wanted to turn professional. And I'm thinking to myself, I still have a year left to graduate, is this the right decision to make? I'm not sure that call would have taken place if the Devils were in a better position, but this was Mario Lee's draft year. And everybody knows the story about Pittsburgh and the Devils. It was back and forth. They were the two worst teams in the league back then. So this gave me an opportunity to come in right at the end of the season and play in live games. Back then there were 65 players at training camp, so try finding your way and making an impact when you're in training camp with 65 players. So very lucky to come here to New Jersey, played a few games. Team got eliminated from the playoffs fairly early, so they sent me to the minor league team, which we shared with the Flyers in Portland, Maine. Went down there, played about a dozen games. We were in 5th place when I got there. They bolstered the lineup with a couple of guys that, on the Flyers side that were playing in Europe and came back after their playoffs were over. Don't you know it? We won the whole thing, win a Calder Cup. So my first opportunity, again, here I am, thrust into like luck again, decide to turn pro, and I'm winning a Calder Cup Championship, my first chance of playing pro hockey. Come back the next training camp, and again, any player will tell you, training camp sometimes got to go right for you. I credit Bob Lormer, who played with the New York Islanders. Back then, there was, I think we played about 13 preseason games. I played 9, and I think 7 of them I played with Bob Lormer, and we weren't on for a single goal against the entire camp, the games I played with him. So a lot of times who you play with in camp, it matters. So I ended up making it right at training camp, and that's kind of how my career started. And I realized, when I think back to being cut by that team in Toronto, a lot of great players. They're already talking about those kids being the next generation of NHL players. And I even see it here in New Jersey. I've been coaching for 23 years. And there's so much stress put on kids at a young age to focus in on one sport, and way too much hockey. I work for the Devils. Obviously, we have our grassroots program. But I think kids become better athletes in the sport. They're good at playing multiple sports. And I did as a kid. I played everything from hockey, lacrosse, baseball, basketball, football, you name the sport. I tried. I mean, I was great at it, but I played as many as I could. And I look back to that group of players that I played with in 4 years, and there was only one other player that made it to the NHL. So, again, I know I was lucky, and it takes a lot of development to make it. But again, all those decisions I made and being fortunate to play with great teams, you don't end up having a career, unless you're a little bit lucky. And I know there's players undrafted that make it as well.
So Bruce, you just reminded me of something that I didn't remember. So I actually started my career in New York. I was in Binghamton, New York, covering the American Hockey League team. And ironically, I got a job at the Morristown Record, and my first year covering the Devils was 84-85. So you're there. That was the group where Max McNabb put together a young bunch of guys. Sorella, Muller was drafted right after Lemieux, Johnny McClain, and Chico was still there. But I think the Devils as an organization, predates even Lou, but Max understood it's not just the talent. Obviously the talent is critical, but it's building from the start, a bunch of young guys playing together. I remember that club, now this is 4 years before you even started to become a seriously good team, building something, which culminated obviously 10 seasons later with some of the same guys, obviously a lot more talent, which kind of parallels what Fitzgerald is trying to do now. So can you talk about remembering 84, 85, and am I right? Is that part of the...
You're absolutely right. I mean, our teams early on, we were miserable. We didn't win any games until 87, 88, right? But it was really a group of the older players that were helping group, the Bobby Longers, the Phil Russells, players like that come from different organizations that, as young players, you mentioned we had Joe Sorrell, we had Pat Verbeek, we had Kurt Muller. We had a ton of young guys. We had young guys and the old guys. The old guys were leading the way. And you hear players talk about that all the time. Players who start getting a little bit older, they're brought in to help groom the young players, to teach them a little bit about the pro game, what to expect in every aspect of that hockey life. And it took a while. I mean, the first year we made the playoffs was 87, 88. And we almost made it to the final that year. And we were so close. And then the next year we didn't make the playoffs at all. And And I think it was, you know, we were a young group of players that really grew together. We became a really good team. Sean Burke came in from the Canadian program at the right time. We had a great run. But we still weren't old enough to realize what we did and what it took to get back to this. We didn't make the playoffs the next year. And then it took us 2 or 3 years of losing again in the first round to get back to be able to advance and ultimately win the cup.
So I mentioned the 93-4 season, which is such a critically important season in the metropolitan area. Am I right? Did the 93-94 loss help you guys win the 94-95 cup?
Yeah, there's no question, you know, and everybody knows I had the opportunity to play with the New York Rangers as well, and play with Wayne Gretzky and play with Mark Messier, and a lot is talked about Messier's guarantee. And it's funny, every time I hear him being asked, he chuckles. And I mean, I can't speak for Mark, but my thought process is when he's chuckling, he's probably thinking to himself, like, I said I'm guaranteeing him, but I didn't really, like, it just came out, right? And the reality is, you know, it was 2 great teams battling. In this area, obviously, we see Game 7 play at a time. And everybody forgets that the Rangers actually didn't play us for the cup. They had to play Vancouver Canucks for the cup. But it was a tremendous series for us, and obviously, you know, another lesson learned. We had an okay season. It was a lockout year. I was the players' rep at the time, and you know, computers and everything were not really much in existence back then. So I was trying to keep the players, all our teammates, abreast of the situation, what was going on with the collective bargaining agreement through faxes at 3 in the morning, having meetings with the guys. I was renting ice at South Mountain Arena at the time. 3 days a week, the guys were gonna hang around and skate, try to keep the guys together, not knowing whether the season was gonna start or not. And ironically, I made it in the end. It's not a grave error, but you know, we had training camp that year. My shoulder had been dislocating on and off since this 1992-93 season. Wasn't to the point where I was ready for surgery, but I dislocated early in training camp that year. And I was working hard to get back in playing. And if you know anything about me, like I had to work really hard in the summer to get myself ready to play every year. Some guys didn't have to do that, but it was just my mindset that I knew I had to work extremely hard. So I had all the information on what was going to go on with the collective bargaining agreement. I would say in my head, I was saying we're going to get locked out, but my heart was saying we're going to play. And I believed in my heart instead of my head, so I convinced our trainer to talk to the doctors, talk to the general manager, let them know I'm ready to play the last preseason game to get rotated. 1 game under my belt before the season starts. So they let me play. We got locked out 2 days later. What I found out is if you were injured, you still got paid your NHL salary. So I talked myself out of getting an NHL salary. I think Scott Stevens was hurt at the time. He got paid for like another 3 weeks, even though we were locked out. But we were thankful we were able to come back and play that year, have the season that we had. And it was a little bit rocky. We were good, bad, and indifferent. We were the 9th place team out of 16 teams going to the playoffs, so we certainly weren't expected to win. But we put it all together, obviously, with Jacques Lemaire and Larry Robinson there steering the ship. And we were able to utilize our whole bench, which was pretty incredible. And that's the reason why we won. You look at even today, the game's changed a lot. The skill level is very, very high. Devils had a great year this year. Fast team, very, very exciting, very fun to watch. And in the end, if you look at the 4 teams that were in the end, and you can throw Boston Bruins in there too, they can beat you anyway. Physical game, skill game. So you still need that toughness as well. And I'm going to share a little story, I guess, about. So remember we had a strike, the NHL had a strike. You guys should be very aware of this. Does anybody remember that? Anybody?
91, 92.
Wow. Oof. Okay, so that was a huge turning point in what we're seeing here today. So again, I was a player of the team. And we found out a lot about ownership. Our union became much stronger in those days. It was basically had to do with trading cards and trading card industry. So we found out information that the ownership was making all the money on trading cards. There was deals being made by all these trading card companies, and the NHL was basically making a lot more percentage than we were as players. So we literally went on strike. I want to say it was around April 10th, right before the playoffs, or April 1st maybe it was, realizing that, you know, as players, we don't get paid our salaries during the playoffs. We just get an amount of money that gets divided up by all the players once you get eliminated from the playoffs, and every team does the same thing. They spread the money amongst all the players. A lot of teams we had that had equipment player, that had equipment manager, the head trainer in a share, which means they get the same amount players get. The assistants often get half a share, so you may have 30 shares, and you divide it by the amount of money you get, and that's what we get as players. We play for the Chalice, the Stanley Cup, right? And we found out that, you know, ownerships and the teams would make a lot more money in the playoffs, so we felt if we went on strike, and all we really wanted to do, I mean, obviously free agent had to change, but we wanted our likeness back, our names and our likeness on trading cards, and anything that was done from the standpoint of that end of the business, that at least the Alumni Association could start bankrolling some money. So it was really the make or break thing in the end. You can Google it and look on Wikipedia about the strike. And it was the one sticking point at the end. We agreed to some of the new free agency rules. They had wanted to add a few more games to the season, add some global games into the season as well. But it was really the trading card and our rights to our names and likeness that was going to be now split down the middle, which allowed the association to bank enough money that when we got locked out in 1994-95, we did have money sitting with the Alumni Association to pay out to the players while we were locked out to make sure that we stayed strong to what we wanted to do, what we wanted to agree to in 94-95. We certainly point to 91-92 as being a time when, you know, with regard to merchandise, memorabilia, trading cards, that's when trading cards started exploding, for sure.
Before I open it up to questions, everybody always asks us, what do you have in your collection? What jerseys?
I'd have to search and see. I mean, I know I have hanging in my family room, I have my Devils Stanley Cup white jersey. I have a Wisconsin jersey, I have a Team Canada jersey, and I have a Ranger jersey. I don't know if I have a second jersey from the Rangers. My wife bought an old cedar chest. I know I have one, if not two, jerseys of the year I was captain. I've got some sticks in my basement. I don't have Wayne Gretzky's original Easton shaft that he used at first. I do have a shaft that's like it, not one that he used. I think I have a couple things from the Olympics. I might have a Czech signed stick in my basement. Madison was talking about Wisconsin. I have a stick from our national championship team that all the players signed. The Canadian Olympic team as well. I've got a lot of stuff all over the place. I wouldn't consider myself a collector. I'm more of a pack rat, I guess. My wife, like, you need to start throwing some stuff out. We actually had a party for some friends a couple of weekends ago, and the topic got on about trophies and stuff. Like, she's I'm going to take a bunch of Bruce's old trophies when he was a kid and take the name plaques off and take them to the trophy store and sell them. She won't do it. I've got pucks here and there too.
Questions for Bruce?
Yes, sir.
Bruce, I have a question I've been waiting 30 years to ask you. It was early 90s. You came to my company's golf outing at Suburban Company. You were, I think, neighbors of one of the sales guys here. That's how you got tonight, because it was supposed to be for customers. But I met you there. I didn't expect you to be there. It was one of the thrills of my life because I'm a huge hockey fan, you know, I'm a huge Devils fan. And we sat together at dinner, and for like hours we talked nothing but hockey. It was just a pleasure I'll never forget. But at the time, I told you something I always theorized about, and my thought was, for the 2-month-long rule of the Stanley Cup playoffs, if you go all the way, I thought that the players should be absconded like they're on a road trip. No things to worry about at home, no brass to cut, no kids to take you practice. Just get on the road, even at home, and just concentrate on winning a cup. And knowing how important that was. And I've always been dying to ask you, because the 95, and that went all the way, obviously. Did you guys do that? Because I think teams did adopt that later on, that whole philosophy about that 2-month-long road trip to win the cup.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was Lou. It was really Lou. I mean, when Lou Lamorola came in 87, 88, he really changed the culture of the organization. The first thing he made sure was any new contracts that were signed, there was no individual player bonuses. So he got rid of goals, bonuses, plus minus bonuses used to be big. And then I don't know if anybody knows about plus minus. If you're on for even strength goal, you get a plus. If you're on for one against, you get a minus. So Lou's philosophy would be, okay, well, the defensemen see a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1, they've been on the ice for a minute, and they're going to stay on to get the plus because they got a plus minus bonus. And the forwards, if they're back checking and it's a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-2, they're going on the bench to jump off as fast as they can so they don't get a minus. So Lou changed the structure of everything. Everything became team-based, which was genius. We had 5-game segments. All the players would benefit if we hit our number in the 5-game segment. We had power play percentage, penalty killing percentage. If we had a shutout, it wasn't the goalie that received part of the bonus. Everybody received the same amount. So it was genius in that he did that. And then, you know, as you said, with regard to staying in hotels and minimizing all the distractions, Lou was vilified for that. And he was one of the probably first general managers that did that. To me, as a player, it made it easy for me to focus on playing. So essentially the way things worked, if we played 2 home games, we would be in the hotel. We would practice the day before the first game. We'd probably have a team dinner that night. We're at the hotel. We play the game, we go back. Sometimes we practice, sometimes we didn't. Team dinner again, because we play every other day, back in the hotel. When we went to leave on the road trip, so we played 2 games at home, we'd be allowed to stay at home with our family that night. Because back then, in the early 90s and mid 90s, we were flying commercial, still not as much charter. So then we'd be allowed to see our family and stuff. But it just made things easier for us to focus solely on playing and not really, you know, worrying about a lot of other things. And in the playoffs, especially as you go further and further, you get, you know, everybody that you know wants tickets to the game, and everyone wants to come down, and all family and friends. So he made it very easy for us to focus on just playing hockey. And I can tell you, I mean, you know, you should probably bring my wife here to talk sometime. So my wife at that time, I was one of the older wives on the team. Most of the guys weren't even married. I had children at the time we won the cup. But Lou Lamorola respects my wife to this day, and that there are times where, you know, she would go to him and say, you know, look, the wives need this, the wives need that. And Lou really took care of the players and wives. Was vilified a lot in the media for things that he did. It was totally construed the wrong way. I can tell you today, and I probably wouldn't want this to get out there, but it's the kind of heart the gentleman has. He's been gone from the Devils for many, many years. Was the general manager of Toronto Maple Leafs for many years. Now he's with the New York Islanders. Still to this day, every Christmas, I get a flower arrangement sent to my house. Think about that. Right? Doesn't happen a lot, right? Terrific human.
Questions? All right, Bruce, thank you.
Can I tell my story about my Stanley Cup?
Of course.
Yeah, so you could be in the room, I don't know. So yeah, like as a player, you know, you're kind of oblivious to the whole memorabilia thing. The players probably are a little bit more in tune today because it's, you know, when I was younger, there was no real market for it. And obviously the players that played prior to me, you know, that didn't hardly make any money. As I said, 91, 92 in our log, at 94, 95, after those two events, we started to see salaries start to grow a little bit in the NHL, and it was really because of those two events. We gained our likeness back, free agency changed a little bit. With regard to salary disclosure, we had to all agree to salary disclosure so that every single agent knew what every player made, and that's when we kind of saw salaries start to grow a little bit. So in the year that we played the Stanley Cup in '94-'95, because of the lockout, we started later. We started in Boston. And I literally had this conversation 2 days ago with our head equipment manager, Dave Nichols, and kind of refreshing his mind on what went on with our jerseys that year. So the old Boston Garden had no air conditioning, so it was ridiculously hot. Again, I didn't know how many jerseys, how many sets of jerseys we were made any year. I thought we just had the same sets of jerseys, and oblivious to that, you just wear them. I didn't know they were stamped with the year on the back or nothing like that, but I found out later all about that stuff. So we practiced the day before we started in Boston, and it was so hot in Boston Garden that Dave Nichols had actually, the jerseys weren't like the fish netty kind of material.
Ultra filled, they're called.
Yeah.
Heavy ultra filled.
It was a heavier jersey, and we were dying. He actually took the playoff jerseys that we used in '93-'94, and he had the whole set with us. Took the patches, put the patches on the '93-'94. So the jersey that I wore the entire playoffs was from 1993-'94. But fast forward the next year, I'm playing for the Rangers, and I had somebody meet me on the way out of the Meadowlands after the first game I played, the Devils, and he had my Stanley Cup jersey with the patch on it from '94-'95. And I had to explain this. I'm sorry. I said, I don't know how much you paid for this. I said, but I never wore it. So kind of a crazy story, and things are. I don't know how much everything was authenticized back then. Probably not as much as they are today, but you can be thankful for the people that authenticize everything now. That probably wouldn't happen anymore. I never asked him how much he paid for it, but he thought it was my gameworn jersey, and I never wore it.
And little do all of you know, Bruce is applying for it to become a MeiGray authenticator.
Yeah, maybe. Sure.
Who was your favorite player to play against, or someone that was really?
People ask me who the hardest player for me to play against as a defenseman. And everybody would think I'd say probably Wayne Gretzky, someone with tremendous skill. He was very hard to play against, don't get me wrong. But I was 6 foot tall, 185 pounds when I played, so probably a little bit heavier than Wayne, but not much. Wayne was probably 179, 180. But part of the reason why I played so long was not really my ability, it was my hockey smarts, my hockey intelligence to be able to anticipate plays, what was going to happen. Not to Wayne's degree, I would never say I'm even in the ballpark of Wayne and how he thought the game. But for me, the defensive aspect of the game, I was pretty good that way. So the guys that were not overly big for me, because I wasn't a big, strong guy, they weren't as difficult to play against. I still say today that Yager was the toughest guy for me to play against. He'd get in the corners, you just couldn't get the puck off him at all. Another couple guys, old Flyers players, John LeClaire, always seemed to be trying to beat him with cross checks in front of the net. I still tell a story about Tim Kerr. Gentle giant, like one of the great guys that was a big, huge, strong gentleman, but one of the nicest guys you ever want to meet. I'll never forget, the Spectrum was probably the toughest building to play in because they dumped beer on us just about every game. Nothing got done, nobody got thrown out, tough building to play in, but I still recall, they were on the power play and Timmy Kerr standing in front. He was probably about 230, 235 at the time. And I'm trying to move. And that was the day where you can cross-check guys in front of that. Ironically, my old teammate and roommate on and off for 10 years, Ken Danico, he used to cross-check guys in the corner. They'd be down on all fours, and the ref would give him a penalty, and he'd go, "You can't call that, that's pure brute strength." So but that's the way the game was played. We didn't use our sticks to get guys out. And I cross-checked Timmy, I had it 20 times, and I finally knocked him to the ice. He gets up, he slugs me in the side of the head, I go down, referees come in and go to the penalty box. We're sitting in the penalty box, and he goes, "Hey, sorry about that." I'm like, "Timmy, I cross-checked you 25 times, that's the kind of guy." But that's a little bit of the respect of the game, right? I mean, he understood I had a job to do to try to move in front of that. And I took a slug in the head. I mean, we didn't end up fighting or anything, but it was kind of funny that you're sitting there in the penalty box, and players have that respect for each other. Kind of cool. Yeah.
So if you could just briefly take me through the mindset and the process that brought you from leaving the Devils to sign a free agent contract with the Rangers.
Yeah, people ask me that a lot, so it's this is the God's honest truth. Everybody thought I left for the money. It had absolutely nothing to do with the money. Back then, no trade clause were pretty much not in existence. They weren't at all. That's actually that year was. It's my understanding. I really don't know, but it's my understanding. There was a line item in the contracts, almost like a checkbox. For no trade clause in the contract. I could be wrong, I could be right, I really don't. That was my understanding. So, free agency was July 1st. I signed with the Rangers on August 23rd, 24th. So it was a long period of time that took place there. So because the season went longer, the Devils had a couple of players in the minors, a couple of defensemen in the minors that was down there for a few years and really had to come up and start playing. I was the oldest defenseman in the team. I already shared with you, my wife was one of the older wives. I already had kids. I went to Lou, well, my agent went to Lou before July 1st and said, "Look, Bruce is just looking for a 3-year contract, no trade. I can't do it." And I didn't have to like it, but I understood it as a business, and if you know Lou was leaving every avenue open to improve the team. Whether I was the main guy in the trade, thrown into the trade, thrown into a 5-player trade, a 3-team deal, whatever. So, literally I got that response back from my agent saying he's not willing to give you no trade clause. I didn't want to move. I felt, I'd be one of the guys probably be moved because I was an older guy. My shoulder had been, as I said, been dislocated on and off since 1993. I had shoulder surgery July 7th. There's question whether I'm going to be able to come back and play or not. So Neil Smith called me. Yeah, we talked to Neil Smith. Neil Smith called me, or called my agent. Bruce wants a 3-year no trade clause. Done. Give him 3 years no trade. We never talked about no money, no nothing. This is early July. My agent was working with Toronto, St. Louis, New Jersey, and New York. Toronto appealed to me a little bit. Being hometown, but then there's a lot of the pressures. You're there, friends, your kids you grew up with. St. Louis kind of fell off the way for a little bit. Toronto fell off the way. But literally all summer long, I kept going back to Lou and meeting with Lou. I'll never forget. I was here in New Jersey. I spent a lot of time in Toronto in the summer just to skate towards the end of the summer. This was probably end of July, probably early August. Dr. Rick Mullen had his own plane. So we went to Teterboro. I went to Teterboro Airport, jumped in the plane, Dr. Mullen's plane with Lou, flew up to Toronto to a little small airport up there, met my agent at a little golf course, had the conversation again. All Bruce wants is a 3-year no trade club. I'd love to, but I can't. I had to get on the plane with Lou, me and him on that plane, and fly back, knowing that's it. My Devils career is done. So I let Lou walk off the plane. I was like, there's not a word said on the flight all the way back. And he walked off the plane. I was disappointed again. I understood. And again, we went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I was in Toronto training towards, like I said, around August 23rd, 24th. The day prior, I got a phone call. I don't remember who it was in the Devils organization, said the Stanley Cup was going to be in Toronto for a day. It had been in Russia with Slava Tisov, it was gonna be in Toronto, and it was on its way to British Columbia for Scott Beamer to take the cup. I was supposed to get the cup here, in New Jersey. So they called me, I said, "You want the cup today?" I said, "Great, yeah, I'll have it." And that was the first year they had to keep the cup because the Rangers damaged it so much the year before. They now had a guy fall in the cup. So this was all new stuff, like we didn't know what to expect. So I didn't have any time to plan. Just got a hold of family, friends, had the cup at my house for half the day, took it to my mother-in-law's for half the day. Experienced and thought as many people as I could, but I couldn't plan an event that were local ranked and stuff like that. So I went to my mother-in-law's house. Boom! My agent gets a phone call from Neil Smith. He was at my parents' house, didn't do it at my mother's house. Now he's calling my mother-in-law's house. Says Neil Smith is coming to Toronto tomorrow to sign to the contract. All right, I'm gonna make one more phone call. So I call back to Lou. Lou, Neil Smith's coming tomorrow to sign me to the contract. I said, all you gotta do is tell me you'll give me no trails. I tell him not to come. Never talk money with the Devils. Never talk money with the Rangers. Met with Neil Smith that next day for the first time. Sat down. We probably talked for an hour about the Devils and how we played and how we won the Stanley Cup that year and the system that we played. He said, "What do you want? Money-wise?" My agent gave him a figure. He called New York. "How about this?" Okay, done. My contract was literally done in 20 minutes. The money. So people that think I left to the Rangers for money, it had nothing to do with money. It had everything to do with me not being traded and making sure that I could keep my family staying. I stayed in the same house in New Jersey. Did I make more money playing for it? A little, like just a tiny bit. The reality of that situation is Tommy Abilene was the second oldest defenseman in the team. He got traded to Calgary after that. So there you go. I probably would have been gone somewhere where I didn't have a choice in where I wanted to go. So I ended up playing 3 years for New York. Lived in the same house, just commuted to New York like half the people do in New Jersey anyway. But that's the true story. And I will say this, and again, it reverts back to Lou sending that flower arrangement to my house every year. That night he told me, he said, "Bruce," he said, "when you're done playing, call me." Guess what? He did. 23 years later, I'm still standing here working for the organization. So people who say bad things about Lou Arnold, I'll tell you the dead wrong.
Thanks, Bruce.
All right.
Appreciate it.